Hey everyone, welcome back to the Gym Owners Podcast. I'm Anthony.
And I'm Natalia.
Today we have a really special guest. We have Ken Jorgenson here, the National Director of CARR. And if you are a brand new business owner or you're thinking about opening up your own business, you are going to want to listen to every bit of this podcast before you sign a lease, because you may be in a nightmare situation if you do not know what you're signing. Ken, thank you for coming on the podcast. This is probably going to be one of my most knowledgeable and value for somebody watching a podcast. So thank you so much for your time today. What is CARR? Tell everybody what CARR is, how it started, and give us a little bit of background.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thanks for having us. We've been really enjoying getting connected up with your team and everything that you guys offer to gym owners and what you guys are doing. So excited to be here today. But a little background on CARR. So we're about 15 years old. We're a fitness center, gym, and healthcare specific commercial real estate firm. So if you think of real estate, obviously you have residential real estate. Those are going to be your homes and condos and all that. You've got commercial, and it's going to be all the business side, land, shopping centers, standalone buildings, and all that. And so we specialize only in the commercial side. And then inside of that, we're very niche and narrow. Our team, we've got about 150 people on our team, coast to coast. We're licensed in all 50 states. And all we do is help gym owners and healthcare providers with their commercial real estate. So leasing, purchasing, doing startups, lease renewals, relocations, expansions, anything related to real estate for gym owners, our team specializes in. So we don't do any listings, or we don't represent landlords or sellers. All we do is help on the tenant or buyer side, because we feel like there's a conflict of interest if you're a broker, you're an agent, and you're representing both sides of the table, both parties, the landlord and the tenant, or the buyer and the seller. That's kind of like going into a court case and having the opposing party's attorney representing you. Like, that would be kind of a dumb move. And so we drew the line in the sand and said, we're only going to work with fitness centers, gyms, healthcare providers, dentists, doctors, all of that on their commercial real estate. So we've been doing it for about 15 years. We've helped tens of thousands of clients around the country. And so this is what we love doing. We love helping those who are in business to help us and keep us healthy and keep us active and keep us moving and all that. And so yeah, that's a little background about our crew.
Very cool.
Awesome. If I had a question, so you have some people that may go, well, I'm just going to go window shop and check Loopnet, or a company like Loopnet. What are some of the downsides from window shopping or checking Loopnet? Like, why is that a bad idea?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, and honestly, we would say across the country, you might say, well, we only have 150 people at your company. That's a good number, but that's certainly not like one of the large commercial firms. But in reality, we're one of the largest healthcare specific firms. And yet our biggest competitor is not another commercial real estate firm. Our biggest competitor is the gym owner going out and doing the deal themselves. And so that is totally their prerogative, their ability, their right to go do that. But there is so much opportunity to lose in that transaction if they are out looking at Loopnet, driving on the weekend, calling. They might drive around and say, this shopping center is great. And there's a number. There's always a name and a number on the side of the building. And they get that and they call that person up and they say, hey, I really like this space. How much is it? What does a monthly rent look like? And they start that conversation, not realizing that the person they just called is actually an agent of the landlord, of the shopping center owner. And so everything that they say on that first phone call, the negotiation has begun. So everything they say on that first phone call can and will be used against them during the negotiation. That might take 2 or 3 months of back and forth and attorneys and leases and LOIs and RFPs and all that stuff. But everything that they say on that, when they pick up the phone and they say, I live right behind the shopping center, or my wife or my husband, they're always here shopping. My kids go to school right down here. We use this preschool. We love everything they say is now going to be used when that listing agent is going to their client, the landlord, saying, hey, this person really wants in this space. So make sure that we put the rate here and we can put the concessions here. Like that's all used in posture and as leverage. And so that's why we would say, hey, you don't have to use CARR, but you need to make sure that you don't give up your posture and your strategy, and that you go in with the right steps as you look at your real estate. We'd love to work with you, but you don't have to use CARR. You need to use somebody though, because if you're just calling people on the weekends and you've never done a commercial real estate transaction, or maybe you've done one or two in your lifetime, you are going to be leaving things on the table. There will be concessions and negotiation points and clauses that you're like, what does that even mean? And I'm sure we'll go into some here in a little bit, but I mean, there are horror stories of clients that came to us and said, I just signed the lease, or actually not clients, fitness center owners, gym owners, doctors that call us and they're like, I just signed the lease. And then I heard this podcast, or I just saw you on speak at this event or that event. Is it too late to help? And we're like, well, once the lease is signed, it kind of is. But they look at it and they're like, well, I didn't know this was going to cost me $60,000 to do this, or $80,000 to do that, or I didn't know that was my responsibility. And so all that stuff is really important to look at on the front end, which I think is some of what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
Sure.
That's so wise. Yeah, you wouldn't believe how many times we've had gym owners who are so gung-ho about getting going, and they'll say, oh, I found this building. Oh, but we have to do a build out. And then the build out ends up taking that much more. Even getting a bathroom, something as simple as a bathroom that they thought was the landlord responsibility. They're like, oh my gosh, I have to put that in. Okay, so now my opening date is going to be about 6 months from now, when they anticipated maybe 3, but going in kind of blind. So I hear it all the time over and over as I meet with new gym owners. And so it's critical that they have someone like you in the middle of that. And why do you have a question? Why did you guys choose like healthcare or like fitness to like specialize in with CARR? Why did you choose?
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, that's a great question. And so our founder, his name is Colin CARR, which is where we get CARR from. Our founder started working for one of the big commercial shops, right when he got started in his career. He went and worked for one of the big commercial firms. And like 95% of commercial agents in the world, they're general agents. So they represent a gym one day and a tire shop the next day and a Taco Bell the next day and an elementary school and maybe a CPA firm all in 1 week. And they represent buyers and sellers, tenants and landlords. They represent anybody that comes their way. And so what happened early on was he would get calls from people in the healthcare space, in the fitness space. And when he would go back to his client, who was the shopping center owner, they would say, oh, they're fitness, they're healthcare. Okay, put the rate here. And when everybody else in the shopping center was here. And so that happened 2 or 3 times. And he went back to his boss and also to the landlord saying, hey, what gives? Like, why are we charging those that are in healthcare higher and more than we're charging everybody else in the shopping center? And the answer was always, they can afford it. Right. So they just think, the gym owners, doctors, dentists, they're desirable tenants. A lot of times they're seen as portfolio stabilizers for commercial property owners, because they know that the rent is going to be paid. They're bringing traffic and they're bringing a benefit to the shopping center, to the commercial property. And so with that, he kept seeing that these healthcare providers were getting taken advantage of. They were doing their own deals. Number one, they were not using brokers. They didn't know that there was so much on the table to negotiate. So they were not using brokers. They were calling on their own. And then number two, they were getting taken advantage of because they weren't represented. And so he just didn't feel right about that. And fast forward a few months, and he was like, he and his wife were like, it's time, let's step out and do something on our own. They stepped out into only specifically representing healthcare tenants and buyers, fitness, gym, veterinarians. We get into animal health as well. And then doctors, dentists, med spas. I mean, just everything, anything in the healthcare space, we represent and our team represents. but he stepped out about 15 years ago, and within a few months had to hire another agent, and then a few months later hired another agent. And so for the first X amount of years, I think it was 4 or 5 years, we were in Colorado. That's where we're based out of, in Colorado only. And just doing all the deals up and down, helping all the providers up and down in the Front Range. And that's when we started getting larger groups calling saying, hey, it's great you can help us in Colorado. Why can't you help us in Miami or in Michigan or in Maine or in LA or Chicago or wherever? And that's when we started saying, let's expand. There's no one doing what we're doing on a national scale. So let's get the licenses. Let's hire the team. Let's pick the right people. And then let's just stay very focused, niche and narrow. And so from day one, the whole heartbeat behind CARR has been helping people who help people. And so you look at people that get into fitness, into healthcare, and they're doing it because they have a true desire to help us live better, live longer, be healthier, be more active. And so the heartbeat of CARR has been to go in and specifically represent and advocate for those people who are doing their life work, doing their life passion, which is keeping us healthy.
Awesome. I wanted to jump back to where we were talking before about asking concessions, because now you've got my interest. We already determined that you're not even charging the owner anything, right? Like that cost comes from the landlord. So I'm interested. What are some things that I should be looking out for? Like I hear free rent, the builder, the build out. Can you go over things that should be like a given? And if you didn't get those things, because maybe you already did sign a lease and you're watching this, maybe you were taken advantage of a little bit. What are some things that you fight for when using, if I was to use you?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a lot of things. And we usually say, like, most of the time, a gym owner is going to say, okay, just tell me how much it's going to cost. What is the monthly rent? What is that price per square foot is what they do in commercial real estate. So what's that price per square foot, or what's that monthly rent? Just tell me how much it's going to cost. I really like this space. The problem with that thinking is if it just came down to rate and term, the landlord would not have their attorneys drafting 60 or 70 or 80 page single lease, like 12-point font leases. There's so much more that goes into it than just rate and term. And so to your question, we look at the lease rate. We want to make sure that that's a fair market rate or under market rate. We also are going to look at things like free rent periods. Like once you open up, how much time we like to try to negotiate a ramp up period, a little bit of a runway there for our client to have some time before they have to start paying the rent. Usually we go in and we ask for 3 months. We don't always get that, but we try to get 1 or 2 months, maybe 3 months worth of free rent once they open up, so that you can get, you got a lot of cost when you open up a gym, right? And so if we can get some time and create a little margin there, a little breathing room before you actually have to start paying the rent, that helps with things like marketing and staffing and all the initial costs of getting up and running. But build out, the free rent period is different. And tell you were talking about the build out period, like having to construct a bathroom, or you might even have to do even more than that. Might be looking at offices. You might have to demo something, that the old build out that was in the space. And so there might be construction that has to go on. Most likely there is. And if that's the case, we want to make sure you're not paying for anything during that construction period either. And if your lease is not written in the right way, you could sign the lease and have to start paying rent in 30 or 60 or 90 days, when all of a sudden you sign the lease, give them your security deposit, and then you get with your contractor, and they're like, oh yeah, we have to actually go into permitting for this, and the permitting office might take 4 months, and then the construction is going to take another 3 months, and then this, and then that, and you're like, wait a second, I'm not going to be able to open up for like 9 months. And I have to start paying rent in 3 months. That's a recipe for disaster. I'm going to be broke and bankrupt before I even start my business. And so we always negotiate for build out time and free rent. And we look at the annual escalations. Every lease is going to have an annual escalation built in. So let's say your rent payment is $25 a square foot this year, it's likely going to be 2 or 3 or 4% higher next year. We always try to negotiate that as low as possible. We look at things like the improvement allowance. Now, this is something, there's a lot of confusion around this, but sometimes it's called the tenant improvement allowance. It might be TIA, tenant improvement allowance, or it could just be called build out allowance. But this is going to be money that the landlord actually is investing in the actual construction. So they won't pay for equipment or things that are specific to you, but they will pay for part of the construction, if it's negotiated properly, part of the construction of a bathroom or locker rooms or office space or whatever else is needed in there. And you might say, hey, I'm going to sign a 5 or 7 or 10 year lease. I don't want to have to be the only one putting money into this lease space to get it constructed the way I want. I want new flooring, new paint, new lights, I need 2 offices here and a bathroom back there. And so a lot of times, if you have the right strategy, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, but if you have the right negotiation strategy, you can get landlords to sharpen their pencil and give you not only the time, the free rent build out time, but also a tenant improvement allowance that might be equal to, $10, $20, $50, $100,000 or more of construction costs. So that can be very substantial. And then all kinds of other things like assignment language. If you end up wanting to sell the gym at some point, can you assign that lease? Renewal terms. Are you going to sign a 5 or 10 year lease? We want you to at least have the option, not the requirement, but we want you to have the option that if you want to stay put, you can get, usually we do like a 10-year term with 2 5-year options. So you have the ability to stay there as long as you want, 20 years or more, but you're not committed to that entire time. You get to have some renewal periods in there. Even things like who's going to take care of the HVAC? Or the roof if there's issues, or if a demising wall has to be put up. If maybe there's a 40,000 square foot space, you only need 20,000 square feet. Landlord's agreeing to give you 20,000. Who's going to build that wall? In many cases, the lease is going to say you have to as the tenant. Well, that wall could be, if it's a fire rated thick wall with electric and all this, that can be a $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 wall. Mm-hmm. And you're like, I have to put 70,000 into this before I can even do any build out in my own space. Like, that's kind of crazy. But even things like exclusivity, if you're going to be selling, if you're going to have any retail presence in your gym, do you want to have any kind of exclusivity in terms of what the landlord can what other kind of retail centers they can bring in with the other shop space or parking? Parking's a big deal for gyms. And so what happens if parking is limited? You want to make sure that you've got that in the lease. You want to make sure signage. Do you get pylon sign or monument sign, or, are there going to be restrictions on the hours you can do? There's all kinds of things that are negotiable, but you just want to make sure that you are either studying it, like you're listening to the podcast right now, do your due diligence, make sure that you're reading up on it, but you also have a good team of advisors, a consultant, a brokerage like ours, us or somebody else like ours, a good commercial real estate attorney. You want to make sure you have a good team that's in place. A CPA can be very helpful as you're setting up your entity and you're making sure you're signing the lease the right way and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot that goes into it. It's not a just tell me how much the lease rate is and then let me sign on the dotted line.
Yeah. Or if I know the guy and everything is he's a stand-up guy, like I'm sure you've heard of horror stories that can happen from there. So just to do, because again, I'm approaching as if I was a brand new owner and I'm listening to this and I have the opportunity to ask you questions. You said free rent. So let's say I got free rent, he agreed to free rent, but I also had to where they were going to update the bathrooms and make them to code because now I'm a gym, I have to do handicap and, I have to get everything up to code. Does you fight for free rent after the build out is finished, or does the free rent start like as soon as you sign the lease?
So great question. You have those are two different, like if you look at our standard CARR, LOI or RFP, we have one line in there that is tied to the build out allowance. So we're saying we want this much build out allowance or tenant improvement allowance. And we also need, 120 days from the date we get the permits from the county, or we need 6 months or 8 months worth of build out time. If we get it done sooner, that's great. But I don't want to have a tenant. We don't want to have a client who's paying rent before their business is even open. And so it's two different lines on our letter of intent. And it would be two different clauses in the lease. One would be, here's how much time you have for construction, and here's what happens if we go over that time. And then the second would be free rent upon opening. So now I've got the certificate of occupancy. The lease is signed, the construction's done, my staff is hired, marketing is going, I've got the CO. Now I'm open for business. How many days or months do I have before I have to start paying rent? And so those two figures, it really depends. Some markets, the permitting and construction process may only take 4 to 6 months. In other markets, I was on with one of our Miami agents, and they're like, a lot of these plans, the architect or the general contractor, whoever will submit them to the county, they're going to sit with the county for 4 months before they actually get stamped and approved. Wow. And that's if they get approved on the first go. If they go back and forth and the county says denied because you need to change this wall and this and that, it could be 5, 6, 7 months. So it really depends. It's market by market. And that's why you want to work with somebody who's got good local presence so that your agent knows, okay, I know the build out's going to take 7 months. I'm going to go negotiate 8 or 9 worth of build out time or whatever. Or you might be in a more rural area and like, hey, I can walk down to the county planning and zoning department and get some answers pretty easily. And if that's the case, it might only take you 2 or 3 months or 4 months. It just depends. But to your point, we're going to have a build out time frame, and then we are also going to have free rent after that, once you're open for business.
Nice.
But
okay.
You have so many different, just question on that. Like you have so many people who run into so many like speed bumps or hurdles. Cause like I have a guy who has a 20,000 square foot facility that he's opening in a very rural area. Like there's nothing around. And he has had to postpone his opening 6 months because his county they take longer. So then when he negotiates this lease, like say it ends up being, and you guys have thought, well, this is the average time, but what happens when it's outside of the average time? It ends up being 3 months past when it would start. Then what do you do at that point? You can't really.
Yeah. So a couple things. One, many times you might see LOIs where we try to negotiate a time rather than give us 6 months of build out time. We say give us 90 days or 120 days or 150 days from approved permits. Meaning, if it's going to take a week to get the permits, then at that point, our 4 months of build out time starts. If it's going to take 4 or 5 months to get permits, at that point, that's when our build out time starts. Now, landlords push against that because they're like, well, how am I going to have any control over when you get your permits? What if it takes 6 months for you to get your designs figured out and before you even submit? Like, I don't want to sit on this space. So there is negotiation back and forth. That doesn't always work for sure. Most of the time, the landlords are going to want a specific window of time. With that said, you can negotiate things into that clause that give you some potential extensions. But even if you don't have that, if you've got a third party, you've got somebody that's removed from the situation, an agent. A lot of times your CARR agent would call the landlord and just say, hey, we just signed this 5-year or 10-year lease. This is the start of a good long-term relationship that we want to be here for the next decade or more. And it looks like construction is going to take 2 months longer because we were just waiting on the county. And so if you want the best shot of this business succeeding, we need a little extra help on the front end. And so having somebody that knows how to have some of those conversations and how to package it and frame it for the landlord is really helpful. It beats you just calling up the landlord and begging for extra time. because once the lease is signed, it's a legal document, right? And so if you've got somebody though that knows how to have those conversations, that's really helpful.
Yeah, I think it's critical. It sounds like for a new owner.
Wow.
Yeah.
I know so many people that got affected by that would have like, oh man, that's crazy. I do have a question. Like, so now somebody's watching, he's like, oh, this isn't my, I think I could still have this. Now throw some like terms like what CPI is, and really, you know what you're doing? Do you know what CPI is? Do you know how that can affect your lease? Can you go over what that is?
Yeah. So CPI is Consumer Price Index. And so a lot of times people, like we always like to say, we know that the lease is going to increase. There's an annual escalation every year. That's standard in commercial real estate. Our goal as a tenant agent, we're representing the gym owner. Our goal is to bring that escalation as low as possible. If we can get maybe the first year or two with no escalation and then a 2 or 3%. There are many states like in Florida, in Georgia, there are a number of states where the bigger shopping centers are pushing 5% annual escalations right now. And so what that means is over a 10-year term, if you just like compound interest with your 401k or your investments, after 10 years of these escalations, there's a compound effect that you end up being way over market. And because it just keeps going up 4, 5, 6% a year, whatever it is. And so our goal is to bring that escalation every year, every 12-month period that your lease resets, we try to bring that down as low as possible. We try to get it at 2 or 3%. With that said, many landlords push to get it tied to what's called CPI, the Consumer Price Index. It's an index that basically shows where prices are in the United States and where that it's tied to inflation. So as you can guess, where inflation has been the last couple of years, we've had a lot of gym owners, we've got a lot of healthcare providers, med spas reach out to us, urgent cares, saying, you didn't help me on my first lease, but I'm calling you because I am drowning now. I just got an 8% or a 10% bump in my rent this year. I just got my new rent payment, and it went from $5,000 a month to $6,200 or to this or to that. It was $15,000 a month, and now it's $18,000 or $19,000 a month. I mean, that's a staff person. Sure. That is just now going to, the equivalent of what you're paying extra each month. So all that to say, they typically like to have it tied to some kind of index, like a CPI. We always like to have it tied to a percentage, because then we know how to plan for that. We know we can say to our client, hey, this is the rent this year. This is what it'll be this year. This is what it'll be year 3, year 4, year 5. We can project. We have control over that. We know what it's going to look like. And so, again, that's a negotiation point. But if you don't know what that means, and you're looking at a lease and all you're concerned about is what that first year payment's going to look like, that you're missing it, because you're going to get into year 2 and realize, wait a second, the HVAC is broken and that's $40,000, and the pavement needs to be fixed, and I didn't know that was on me. Why is this on me? It's not my shopping center. Or the neighboring tenant is creating all kinds of issues, and what do I have? What is my ability to rectify that? And now all of a sudden I'm getting a new bill, and I was paying, $14,000 a month, and now it's $17,000 or $18,000 a month. Like, what the heck? And so all of that goes into what you need to make sure that you're looking at and negotiating. And what I was going to say earlier too, and stop me if I'm talking too much, but what I would say is we've kind of talked through what is negotiable. What I can tell you is the listing agent, the person you call on the side of the building, is not going to be talking about any of this stuff. They're going to be talking about, oh yeah, it's $16,000 a month. It's $10,000 a month. It's $6,200 a month. That's what they're going to focus on. And that's really all that they're going to focus on. They're going to send you over the lease, but they want to get you excited and interested and moving in the direction. And, oh, you could put this here and that there. They're not going to give you everything you can negotiate. They're not going to say, okay, here's the 17 things you should focus on, or the 23 negotiation points, or whatever. They're just going to give you the rate and term. And so the only way to get a fair market deal to level the playing field, excuse me, is to have posture. And so when we bring on a new client, the CARR game plan is specific to and is a very specific strategy of creating this posture. And the posture is built on our client having options. So again, if you're driving around on the weekend and you like this one shopping center, and you call that number, you're negotiating with one property at a time. That's not how to do commercial real estate. It's like in anything in life, whoever has the most options wins. So when we pick up a new client, we have kind of a vision call. We hear what they want, the size they need, the space they need, what kind of facilities do they need? Are they going to do just restrooms? Are they going to do what kind of wet facilities? What kind of plumbing? What kind of parking load are they going to have? Are they going to do locker rooms? Are they going to, what kind of vision do they have? Right. And so we're going to do that. Then we're going to go scour the market and we're going to look at things like Loopnet. But we have the commercial professional version of Loopnet is called CoStar. We're gonna take a look at CoStar. We're gonna take a look at all of the commercial MLS systems. We're gonna scour the market. We're gonna call the listing agents, the landlords, the developers, because many times there are likely new, there are likely new developments coming out of the ground over the next 3, 6, 12 months that may not be listed on Loopnet yet. There are likely going to be tenants that are moving. You might see a small shopping center space and they're relocating down the street. Well, they're not going to list that on Loopnet until it's vacant. Right. And so by working with a commercial agent and having the right posture, you're going to be able to hear and find out about opportunities that are not even on Loopnet or CoStar. So we're going to go scour the market, figure out what options are out there. Then we jump in the car with our client. We go drive around for a couple hours and we say, here's this one. Here's this one. This one's getting built in the next 6 months. This one has 12,000 square feet. And I know the landlord XYZ would offer XYZ. So we're going to go walk through the spaces. We're going to look at window lines and neighboring tenants and parking and signage and the maintenance, how they keep up with the shopping center, what kind of synergy can you have with the other tenants that are in the building. And then the whole idea, we're going to go tour 7, 8, 9 spaces. The goal is not that you love 8 or 9 of them. The goal is that you like 2 or 3 of them, though, maybe 4. And then we negotiate on those 4 simultaneously. And we create the posture, again, from that very first phone call. We tell the listing agent, we say, hey, we have a gym owner. They're opening an XYZ gym. And here's some background on them and what they are bringing to this market. And we are touring 8 other properties. You're one of them, but we're touring 8 other properties. We're doing all that by design because we need to, from that very first phone call, create the position and the posture in that discussion that we have other options on the table. You might be one of them, but we have 3 others that we are negotiating at the same time. Sure. And that is what gets them to sharpen their pencil. And so then they're saying, hey, I'm not going to give them rate card. I'm going to give them a discount. They're working with somebody who knows the market, who knows what the current rates are, what tenant improvement allowances and other concessions should be discussed and negotiated. I'm working with somebody who understands commercial real estate, and I want this tenant. They might be taking 15, 20, 30,000 square feet of my shopping center. I want to fight for their business. Yeah. And so when you have the right posture and the right strategy, you end up getting the best terms, the best concessions, and all those negotiation points are what get covered in those early discussions with them.
Because now they're going to show their cards. They're going to be like, oh, if you go with us, we'll give you this, this, this. And then after that, you can negotiate on top. That's great. Another big mistake is, because I know a lot of gym owners, it's in their dream to build it very big and maybe eventually sell it once they've built it to very big, and then it could go retire or maybe start another facility, but eventually sell it. If you're not careful, that you could probably sign a lease where it's in there like, you could stay here, but you can't sell it to another person. Have you ever heard of stories like that where that's a possibility? And if you don't watch yourself, you're stuck here. You can't even sell this. You could sell your member list, but no one else could come in here as a gym besides you.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are nightmare scenarios. You work for 5, 10, 15 years, you build up this business, you're ready to sell it and move on to whatever the next thing in life is. And then all of a sudden, when you're ready to do that, you realize, wait a second, my hands are tied. I can't do anything with this. And I mean, we've seen scenarios where we actually had a client reach out to us, send us over their lease. They signed the lease, 8 years ago. They're ready to sell the business now. They're on a 10-year lease. And number one, they didn't have any renewals in place. They didn't have any renewal options. So that meant the landlord could kick them out if they wanted, or just not renew, or keep all the build out the way it is and just bring on a different gym. Say, sorry, I'm not going to renew with you. They bring on a different gym that is going to pay more in rent. And now there's like an existing space, existing consumer base. And your members that are used to coming to this space, this shopping center, just because there's a different sign on the different logo on the sign, you're going to lose a percentage of that business. So number one, that's a terrible scenario. But what you mentioned, Anthony, with the assignment language, that's huge, because if you don't have the right assignment language, we actually had somebody reach out, the guy that had 8 years left on his lease. I'm sorry, 2 years left on his lease. He was 8 years in. He was ready to sell his business. And he called us up and said, hey, can you tell me what this language means? I'm just now reading the assignment clause in the lease, which was a page and a half of legal language, legalese. I don't read. I'm not an attorney. He's not an attorney, but I'm reading it. And it said that for the space to be assigned to the next tenant, that 50% of the proceeds of the sale of the business go to the landlord. So he sells his business now for $1 million, $2 million, $5 million, whatever it is. And 50% of that has to go to the landlord, because the landlord said, hey, it was my shopping center and I helped you build up this business, so I get half of it. That's unbelievable. That's terrible. And so all of that stuff needs to be negotiated before you sign the lease, because as soon as you sign it, it's a legal document and you can't get out of it.
Wow. What happens though with like I have someone I know here in town who had like a meal prep. She signed a lease on really crummy lease, like no parking, ended up not being able to use the kitchen. This is something different, but like gyms say they can't get, what if they just don't have any money anymore? Like what happens? Like the business just flops. I mean,
Yeah. So a lot of that depends on how the lease is signed. Obviously, the CPA and attorney is going to say, make sure to sign the lease in the name of your LLC. Because if that LLC goes bankrupt, then that lease dissolves, goes away. If that's a part of the bankruptcy proceedings. The problem is most landlords are going to require some type of personal guarantee. You can't get $1,000 gap credit card without signing a personal guarantee. So if the landlord's going to put $50,000, $100,000 worth of build out allowance and free rent and all the concessions they're giving, they're not going to give you that kind of money without some kind of personal guarantee to be signed. And so if somebody just can't cut it, they'll likely go bankrupt. And then it depends on what that personal guarantee language looks like. Mm-hmm. If they just have to pay back the concessions that they were given, or if they have to pay back the full amount of the remainder of that lease. Can they assign that lease to somebody else? Can they find somebody else to take over that lease? Like there's a lot of different scenarios that could play out that way, but it's not a fun conversation or situation to find yourself in at that point. But that's why looking at that language, a lot of times clients are like, well, I want to negotiate 50 cents off per square foot or $1 off more per square foot, this or that or whatever. And I'm like, that's fine. We can do that. But I want to get you the fairest, best price possible. I want to help you maximize your profitability through real estate, through this lease. But at the end of the day, there are some clauses in this lease that are going to cost you tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's way more important than 50 cents off per foot, right? And so don't trip over. Don't focus on this and then miss what's really important, all the hidden costs and all of the other things that are a part of this lease document.
Wow. Yeah, it's like the car dealership where they just want you to focus on the monthly payment, no matter what they're doing. It's like the total. Yeah, that's great. I have a question before somebody jumps to bankruptcy. Do you guys also help with like rent relief? Like if we ended up going with you, do you guys also help with like rent relief or anything like that, or no?
So it really depends. It depends on what the initial lease looked like. Obviously, we can step in and have a conversation with the landlord. Right. If we were a part of that initial deal, we have some potential and some relationship, maybe some leverage with that landlord. But if the lease is signed, at that point, it is a legal document. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times we can take a look at it and give you some obviously free counsel advice, whatever. Not legal counsel. We're not attorneys, but we would probably suggest that and connect you up with one of the good local healthcare attorneys, and say it's worth $1,000 to have a consultation with him or her and sit down and really look at what your options are, and how you can bring this down. Now, if you're in a lease and you have 2 years left, we may be able to go in and our broker would say, hey, there might be a strategy here for us to get you. We would probably need to extend this to a 5 or 7 or 10 year lease. But if we were to extend the lease, could we negotiate to get the landlord to drop the lease rate of what you're currently paying? And we go to the landlord and we say, hey, they're drowning right now. We want to be here long term. Or we may try to find a buyer for this and somebody comes in and buys this business, or they're going to list the business and try to sell it. But we need some immediate relief right now on the rent rate. So if we sign a longer term, can we get maybe some lower rent payments right now? We do. So that might be in terms of rent relief. But I would tell you that the most common transaction in any market around the country is the lease renewal transactions. So if you think about it, you've got a lot of new businesses, new leases. You got a lot of relocations, maybe expansions or additional locations. But more often than that, what is occurring is somebody's been in their space for 5 or 10 years. And now that lease is maybe that initial 10-year lease, they're on year 9 of that lease. Now it's time, okay, the landlord's going to give you, hey, here's your lease renewal. And I'm not going to raise your rent more than the normal 3 or 4% every year. And so just sign this 5-year extension or 10-year extension. What happens though is, like I said, after 5, 10, 15 years of annual escalations, typically that lease payment is now $36 a square foot when the market has gone up from the initial $25 you signed 10 years ago, but it's not at 36. The market right now is at 31. And the landlord's being a good guy by not raising your rent anymore. And he's just going to keep you at your 36 and keep those 3 or 4% annual escalations. And you're like, hey, I'm used to paying 36. I've done it now for the last year. It's kind of you throw a frog into a pot of water and you just turn it up slightly. Okay. They don't know how hot it is until they're dead. Same thing with lease payments. They tick it up light, a little at a time. Over 10 years, that lease payment may be way over market. So we come in and we do the most common transaction we do is a lease renewal negotiation. And so we come in and we say, hey, landlord, our client is this gym, and this gym owner, Pete, said, he would like to stay put, but he's hired our firm to evaluate the other options in the market. And you and I both know he's paying 36. You're charging your other tenants. I can see it on CoStar. You're charging your other tenants 31. And we have this other shopping center across the street and a new development half a mile away. And we are negotiating with both of those. So if you want a shot at retaining Pete and his business, you need to come to the table with some better deals, better terms, better concessions than what you're currently offering him in this lease renewal. Pete and I, as his broker, we know he does not want to relocate. That's very expensive. Yeah. He's going to have to hire a moving company and new marketing and new this and new that. And we don't want Pete to move. But we have to have the posture. We have to have the strategy to that our client is looking at options. So we fully negotiate other properties. And many times Pete may say, I do not want to move. I don't want to relocate. And then we negotiate 2 other spaces and we put them in front of him. And we say, here's what this landlord and that landlord are offering. And he's like, wait a second. Hang on a second.
I'm moving.
This shopping center is way better. Yeah. Parking, signage, lighting. They have a better anchor tenant.
Yeah.
Like I would, and it's going to be $4,000 a month less. Like 100%.
Get the moving truck.
Move. Exactly. So we do that quite often. But even if Pete doesn't want to move, we negotiate those other options. We go to the landlord and we say, here's how you can retain Pete for another 5 or 10 years. And when you have the right posture and the right strategy and the right approach, and you get the landlord to actually treat you like they would any other new tenant, that's when you can get, a lot of times you can get tenant improvement allowance, even on a renewal. We say, hey, Pete is saying that the back door is broken, the bathroom plumbing has some issues, and we want some new paint or a new sign or new this or new that. And when they're signing a new lease, they would be giving that concession to a new tenant. So why aren't you giving it to Pete? Yeah. He's been with you for 10 years. He's been great. He's been on time payments. He's been a great tenant. He brings a lot of value to your shopping center. Why wouldn't you give this to somebody who's been with you for a decade when you're going to be offering that to somebody new?
Yeah.
You know, and so we're saying we're not looking to really negotiate aggressively here. We are looking for you to treat Pete fairly, like you would any other new tenant.
Sure. Yeah, all the other tenants are paying far less than him anyway, right? So that's so cool that you do that. I know there was, it's funny, I used to work for a Pilates studio that was next to like a Greek restaurant. And when she initially signed, the owner, right, we didn't know there would be these fumes coming in for the space. But so it would always, one way or another, there'd be like some plumbing issue or some sewage issue, but she was stuck in that space for 5 years or whatever. And then, went to renegotiate with the landlord. And instead of him saying, okay, we're going to stay here, this is when CARR would have come in handy. He was like, sorry, not only are you going to stay, I'm not doing anything about that. And I'm raising the price. So she's like, see you later. You know what I mean? She was out of there. But in that situation, she had to wait. She had to endure that 5 years of everything else, them not fixing it, while she had like a really successful Pilates studio, but we had to deal with that from time to time. And so, a lot of times you don't know you're getting into something like that until you're already in it and the lease agreement signed. And so it's just crucial. I wish a lot of the people that I know would have known about you before they got into their space.
Yeah, but there's no out-of-pocket expense to the gym owner. And he's like, if you don't use me, use somebody like me, which is, and that's the whole point of this episode is say, okay, here's all this information of why you need someone like this, and it's of no expense to you. So I'm just curious, because as of right now, inflation's high. And I know like in the 90s, when there was a big recession, that's when like businesses like doubled. They use that to their advantage. Would you, and I see so many stores now that are empty or for lease, for somebody that's watching this, that is on the fence of being a business owner or is about to open another location, would you say like now is the time to do it because there's good deals out there?
Yeah. So I would say, like many things in life, the best day to start this whole process is 1 year ago today. Mm-hmm. And the second best day would be today. Mm-hmm. Because it's not in terms of in terms of how long it takes and what and so often it's like, if I would have just done it back then I'd be in a better spot now. And so a lot of times when people are kind of waiting on the sidelines or they're waiting, like I'm going to wait for the market this or the election that or inflation to come down here. We had a lot of people during COVID that were like, you know what, this is going to be a great day for commercial real estate. We're going to be able to get all kinds of great deals and stuff like that. And they sat on the sidelines. And what happened 12 months post-COVID? Commercial real estate prices have steadily increased. So where they thought, here's commercial real estate, retail, which is what we're talking about. Talking about retail centers, standalone buildings, first and main type locations. That's what gym owners want. They don't want to be in a high-rise building downtown, LA. That doesn't work for them. So we're talking about retail centers. And so where the market was March, April, May of COVID, everything of 2020, everything hit. Then everybody's thinking, okay, this is going to be a deep dive for rates and commercial real estate and all that. We ended the year where rates were in March. We ended the year about 3-4% higher than that. And 21 was even higher than that. 22 has been higher than that. 23 has been higher than that. So all that to say, you might be driving around saying, hey, this has been empty for a little while or that or whatever. In reality, if you just look at Loopnet, if you looked at Loopnet 2019 to 2024, you're going to see rates have steadily increased. And I don't see that as somebody who's been doing this for over a decade. I don't see that as, or actually almost a decade. I don't see that as I don't see that slowing down with what we're seeing in the market, in the economy. What I would say is if we were office brokers, like I mentioned, the high rises, if I use all of the commercial real estate news that you might see, or the clippings or the headlines, at least that you see, it's Facebook closing down 1 million square feet of their locations across California, or Seattle Microsoft reducing, all the work from home changes that have shifted over the last 3 or 4 years. That definitely has affected office space in commercial real estate. So the big, large, 10-story, 20-story, 30-story office buildings, that definitely has taken a hit in commercial real estate. But what has not taken a hit are the standalone buildings, the retail centers, the shopping centers as much. Right during COVID, there was a lot of I can't pay rent, or these restaurants shutting down, or we're not allowed, there was a lot of that worry and a lot of that concern. But what I can tell you is we're sitting at close to the end of 2024. It is not slowing down, and it doesn't look like it's going to slow down in the coming year or two. It actually looks like it's only going to speed up, because as rates come down, more projects are going to heat up, and that's going to cause more competition for the same space. So all the people that have been sitting on the sidelines for the last year or 2 or 3 years, as soon as the first rate decrease hits, which may be as soon as later this year, we might see 1 or 2, and then even more next year. As that happens, more of those, there's going to be more money flowing in the economy in terms of startup loans, business loans, and all that kind of stuff. More people are going to be going after a limited amount of shopping space, tenant space, commercial real estate space, which then drives the prices up. So again, supply and demand, the best day to do it was a year ago, and the second best day to start would be right now.
Gotcha. Do you think that's more because years ago, it would be individual owners that own the space, and now it's more of investment firms that own the space, and they're like, we're not lowering our price. It is what it is. Is that what it is, or is that just completely wrong?
It could be some of that. It could be some of the large, they call them REITs, the real estate investment trusts that own a lot of these big shopping centers. That could be part of it. But I just think what everybody thought at the beginning or the middle of 2020, what everybody thought was going to happen in the market didn't end up really happening. It did in some, but it didn't in most industries. And so I think the expectation was this is going to be a fire sale in a lot of different places, commercial real estate being one of those. And again, if you were a office broker, that may be the case. You might be getting a really good deal on your commercial real estate renewals and space right now. But in retail, we just have we have brokers around the country. I was talking to our Boston crew last week. I was talking to our Miami crew earlier this week. And a lot of them are saying, look, I have more clients right now that I'm doing property searches for than I have available space. So I'm driving around on the weekends, driving around during my workday, looking for properties and just reaching out to building owners. I know this space isn't for sale. Would you potentially take a look at demising it, or are you using the whole space? I mean, our crew is getting creative because the news cycles out there may be saying, and the headlines may be saying, commercial real estate, you should be getting there's a lot of empty space out there. What they're talking about is the office space. They're not talking about what you and I are talking about today. And so most of our clients are in a situation where they're going to be paying, they're going to be paying rate card for it. And so if we can go in and create a position where the landlord has to get more aggressive with the terms, and we can present this client to them on a silver platter saying, hey, the financing is all set up. We already have the team of advisors surrounding this client. And we're bringing you somebody on a silver platter here, ready to go. If you can just give them fair market concessions, free rent, tenant improvement, build out, annual escalations, all these different, concessions, they're going to actually add a lot of value to your shopping center. They're going to be good for all of your other neighboring tenants. They're going to be a great long-term space for you and tenant for you. And so all of that to say, you've got somebody that knows how to present and pitch and frame the gym owner and the gym space as a tenant to the landlord. That can really be the difference in getting the right terms or even getting the space. Because if you got 3 or 4 people vying for one space and the landlord gets to decide who they want, you want somebody who's able to present you in the best light possible.
Yeah, that's crazy. Now, again, I'm just picturing owners, if they're still made to this far in the video, then go, well, that wouldn't happen to me. Okay, sure. Can you give us some horror stories? Because you said you've been doing this for close to 10 years. Give us a couple of horror stories that stick out to you and what could have prevented that if they would have went with you.
Yeah. So great questions. A couple that initially come to mind. One is we had somebody that came to us, and both of these unfortunately came to us after the lease was signed, and they came and because we do free lease and purchase evaluations. We help clients that want to purchase their space or lease their space. We had one that purchased a building and came to us and said, hey, can you help me sell my land? I just bought this land. It was $1.5 million. Bought this land. Started the process. Seller said that there was when I was interested in it, I just dealt directly with the seller's listing agent, and they said there are multiple people going after this land, so you better make a good offer and it better be a quick close. Well, obviously that's like a used car salesman tactic. Like, come on now. I was like, why? We were like, why'd you fall for that? I mean, come on. But come to find out, he goes, gets an architect, buys the land for $1.5 million, gets a loan, is paying all the closing costs, down payment, all that stuff. Gets an architect, he pays 25, 30 grand for an architect. Then they submit the plans to the county. He's probably in this now, his own money, probably $300,000-$400,000. Plus he has the loan. And goes, and the city comes back and says, I'm sorry, there's a utility easement underneath the land, underneath the lot with power lines. And so the equipment that you want to have in your space is going to mess up with the equipment because it had some radiology type equipment stuff. That's going to mess with the power lines underneath. And so you can't do that. Sorry. We're going to deny that. Now he owns this piece of dirt and he can't do anything with it. And now he's spent hundreds of thousands of dollars because he didn't do the due diligence. He tried to do the deal himself. He didn't know the questions he should be asking. He got pushed into doing a deal quickly and paying over market. Now he's not only going to take a haircut on the money that he paid the architect, the attorney, the closing costs, the loan, the appraisal, all that. Now he paid $1.5 million for the lot that's actually probably worth 1.2 or 1.3. Now he's got to sell that lot. I mean, this was $1 million mistake.
Wow.
That's a terrible. So we had another person reach out to us, business owner, and this was in Orlando, and he reached out to us in Orlando and said, hey, I know my CPA just told me I should have you guys do a free lease evaluation, which is something our team does all the time, a free lease evaluation. We said, great. And we're like, do you have the lease proposal or what are you looking at? And he was like, I just signed my lease a month ago. And we're like, that's too bad. You just signed a 10-year deal or a 7-year deal, whatever it was. It's too late for us to negotiate anything, but excuse me, but we can tell you if you got a good deal or not. And so went in and he sent us over the lease, and our team's doing a free lease evaluation. We're looking at the lease. Come to find out, it's a building. It's a center that we're actually negotiating in with other clients, other tenants. And so we look at the lease, and it says whatever, $30 a square foot, no tenant improvement allowance, 3 or 4 months worth of build out time. And we look at what we've negotiated with the landlord, which is, $27 a square foot, 9 months of build out time, 3 months of free rent, escalations, all that kind of stuff. Come to find out, it was $100,000 difference from what and the space that we're negotiating on was the corner space. It was better than the inline space that he got. And so we're looking at this deal for him. We do a free lease evaluation, and we found out again, he overpaid by 6 figures, and he was in a worse off space. And it ended up being just so those are 2 stories again, where because they had a DIY approach, do it yourself approach. They did not know what they did not know. They didn't know the right questions to ask. They didn't know the right strategy, the right posture, how to get the concessions or the deals, what is negotiable in the lease or the purchase. And so again, there is a lot at stake. And so that's why those are a couple of horror stories that come to mind of people that really did not follow the right path or strategy.
Well, so that's, I mean, if you're trying to think you're going to do it yourself, just don't sign it and then come to you with you said you do a free lease evaluation. So you think you're you want to try everything yourself? Okay, fine. Try to do all that stuff, but do not sign it. Then just have us look over the lease right? Is that the right move to make with somebody?
Yeah. Absolutely. So best case, you bring us in at the front end, because then if you really love that space, we can actually negotiate that much more effectively. Sure. If you've done all the negotiation for a month or 2 and then you bring us in, it's tough because the landlord has had 20 conversations with you. So our posture and our leverage is a little bit diminished, but still we can let you at least know, is this a good fair market deal, or am I getting taken advantage of? In many cases, we'll do that, and they'll say, hey, I'm ready to sign this lease. Can you take a look at it? And they bring us in late, like you're mentioning, they bring us in late. We look at the market, we tell them, hey, you should be paying this, you're at this. And they go back to the landlord. Landlord's like, no, I'm not going to move. I don't know why you would start negotiating those initial terms this far into the negotiation. So take it or leave it. And we end up going and helping those clients find a different location with way better terms. So it's best to bring us in on the front end, but we can do that. If somebody's going to DIY it, do it themselves, we can come in as long as they haven't signed the lease. The deal's not done yet. We can come in and at least give you market comparison to say, this is really what you should be looking at.
Yeah. And you're not making a potential $100,000 mistake or something like that. Because another thing, yes, you should not be doing that. But at least if you're going to try to DIY, don't sign. At least do that at the very least. Because also, if they come to you, you may have done deals with that owner before. You can see what they've negotiated before. And then there may be a little bit of negotiation on the table. But like you said, yes, you should be brought in from the beginning, because then, you hold all your cards there, whereas now you put all your cards on your table for negotiating, and now you're asking somebody to kind of step in and be the big brother and make me get a better price. When it's like, the only thing I got is I could see they have these spots and they were offered this because we've done deals with them before, if you're lucky, right?
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. I would also throw out 2 other big points. Not only what are the negotiation elements of what you should focus on and how you build that posture and strategy. It's good for you to make sure you understand the timeline, and then also what kind of intel you should be looking at. So if we can jump into those here real quickly, the timeline, if you're looking at a new lease, we typically say you need it somewhere between 9 to 12 months worth of time. So if you want to be open by this time next year, you should be starting somewhere between 9 to 12 months in advance. That gives you enough time to research the market, to look at the look at the demographics, to look at properties, tour, you want to negotiate with a few properties simultaneously. You're going to have not only us negotiating like the dollars and the cents, but you need an attorney to negotiate the legal clauses and legal language. So we help walk you through all of that. But that process, again, could take anywhere from 3 months to 6 months worth of time. Well, then you need the time to design, permit, move in, if there's construction and all that. So that's why we say a new lease, plan on about 9 to 12 months lead time before you're actually going to be open up for business. It could be done if it's a move-in ready space, could be done in as quick as 3 or 4 months. Could also take 18 months, right? So that just kind of gives you a ballpark. If you're going to buy a building, if you're actually doing a purchase, it could be anywhere from 9 months to 24 months. If it's a building or a condo, or if it's land, it could be, longer, 18 to 24 months. If you're looking at a lease renewal, like I'm in my space and I'm 7 years into an 8-year lease or 9 years into a 10-year lease, we would say one year out or so, ballpark. 12 months out from your lease expiring is when you want to bring us in to start that lease renewal negotiation, because that gives us the right amount of time to be able to go to the landlord and say, hey, my client has enough time to look at spaces, negotiate on other spaces, and relocate by the time the lease is up, if we want to. We don't want to move, but if you don't get the terms right, then we might have to move. And if you just start that lease renewal negotiation process with 1 month left on the lease, the landlord knows you don't have enough time to move. They know you don't have the right amount.
Would you say in this day and age, like with everything that's going on right now, let's say you have a customer that goes, yeah, I can lease, but I can also buy. Would you still say, like they used to say, buying is the gold standard because your rate's the same? And, would you still recommend that right now versus leasing if you have the ability to buy it, but, that's only if you have those means?
Yeah, so that's the most frequent question that our team gets around the country is it better to purchase or to lease my space? And the answer is yes. It might be better to lease. It might be better to purchase. So there is no one right answer for everybody. So it depends on a lot of different things, like available inventory. If you're in downtown Manhattan, that's going to be different than if you're in Oklahoma or Alabama, or maybe a market where there's a lot more buildings or land available. It's also going to be dependent on access to capital. What are the banks going to require that you put down? How is that going to affect your cash flow? What options are there? Good, viable options in the market? What's your exit strategy? Do you think you want to be in this for 3 years or 5 years or 20 years? If it's 3 or 4 or 5 years, I don't think you should probably be looking at buying something right now, because it's going to take you a while before you start to have any upside on the equity purchase cost, the upfront cost. And so there's a lot that goes into it. Our team will do, like when we're doing a client that just wants a lease, we have a document that puts up to 4 leases side by side that shows them lease payment, annual escalations, down payment requirements, the tenant improvement allowances, if they're borrowing any kind of money, what the financing costs look like. We have something that shows them all in, parking, signage, visibility, everything side by side. We'll do 4 properties side by side for them. Then we have another document that shows them a purchase versus lease. So you might have a scenario where I could lease this space or I could purchase this space. I want to see what that's going to look like, what my upfront costs are, what my tax implications are, what can I write off, what can be depreciated, how does that impact my bottom line, what check am I going to have to cut every single month on a lease versus a purchase? And then once I do my taxes, what does that look like? But then after 10 years, what kind of equity am I going to have in this building if I own it versus if I'm just leasing? I don't have any benefit after 10 years, but I might be in a way better retail center, or I might be on First and Main versus 2 or 3 streets removed, right? So I'm in commercial real estate, but I'm going to be the first to tell you, don't ever put your real estate ahead of your business. I think you should invest in commercial real estate. I do think it should be a part of your portfolio. I don't think it needs to be the same commercial real estate as your business is in. It'd be great if it is, But if the option isn't there and the financing and the cash flow doesn't work and the available inventory, like you would have to be 2 or 3 streets removed from Main Street, I would say lease your business space and then go buy some commercial real estate somewhere else. Let that be your investment. They don't necessarily have to be the same business or the same property, because again, I have a lot of people that will come and they'll say, I own my house. I would never want to lease my commercial real estate. I just want to buy it. And it's like, well, commercial is very different than residential. I suggest you own your house. And if you can own your commercial, that's great, but don't do it at the detriment. You can make a lot more money on your business than what your commercial property is going to grow in terms of value. So focus on your business, put your business first. And if there's a great option to buy, you should do that. We'll help you do that. But if there's not, don't hold out for a purchase option. Go get that lease and get your business started and start doing that. And then you can always look down the road at buying if something comes up, or maybe even a lease with a purchase option. Maybe you sign a lease that has an option to purchase down the road.
If you have the money, great. But if don't do it if you're stretching yourself too thin just to say that you're buying it, if it's going to affect, like, the business didn't do good this month, but because we bought it, we stretched ourselves too far. Is that kind of what I got out of that? Okay.
Absolutely. And honestly, if again, we want to have a vision call, because if the idea is, hey, I want to own 5 locations in this city over the next 6 years, I don't think purchasing is going to be the best bet. You're going to have a lot of cash tied up in opening and staffing and equipping and all this kind of stuff. So if that's the case, we're going to probably suggest, hey, let's get a CPA and an attorney and a consult. Let's get a team of advisors around you to help you make this business decision. One size does not fit all in commercial real estate. And so we're going to look at every situation. We're going to run the numbers, do a purchase versus lease analysis, and make sure that you're making the most informed decision possible and the best decision for your business.
Awesome. I think we need to have Ken back on, like, in the future. So like we had Dr. Jess on before, where she told us the ramification of, like, the release of liability clause and how important it is and all of that stuff to make sure that's locked in. But she had a bunch of horror stories and cited court cases. We liked it so much, we're like, we need to have her back on. I think in the future we'll have to have you back on if you have any more other horror stories to come in. What were they, and how the owner could have protected them? So, I mean, obviously the answer is you could have went with us in the beginning, but what could have protected themselves in that thing that caused that issue, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would love it. And there are definitely horror stories and nothing new under the sun. So if you can learn from somebody else's mistake and that saves you time or money, that's a big deal. And I mean, honestly, we could even do a whole session on what kind of data or intel should a gym owner be looking at. I mean, demographics and competition mapping and member heat mapping, like, to see where all the people are that are members of my gym. I want to see where they live, where are they driving to get to me if I'm looking at relocating or opening up an additional office or I mean, all kinds of different things to take a look at, traffic patterns and income levels, all the different elements that are really vitally important. If I'm going to pump a bunch of money into opening up a business here, I want to make sure I'm doing it in the best possible location. What kind of data and intel should I be looking at? So we could definitely talk about horror stories and things like that, and strategy and all kinds of good stuff.
Awesome. Did you have any other questions? I know you jumped back on. Do you have any other questions before we end the cast? Oh, I can't hear you.
Sorry, that was
No worries.
Yeah, no. I was just going to say that I think that's a really good idea to have Ken back on, and just because we run into, I mean, I wish I would have known about you years ago with how long we've been doing this and all these new owners, because I just even yesterday I was on with another club who is in Sacramento in California in the real estate, and they have a location and they're growing and they need to expand and they can't get a lease or find a location. And I'm going to call them back and say, hey, I got your guy, because
they've already signed the lease. They need to go with you from the beginning, right? Oh, they didn't
sign it. Yeah, they didn't. They're looking at moving and they can't. And their goal is to be open by December 1, but now back in negotiations. And then I had another one just last week, same thing in Maryland, who was having a really hard time. The landlord came back, changed the terms. They thought they would be open by January 1st, or they were negotiating. He said the landlord got greedy, but he's doing it all on his own too. And so anyway, there's people all over who this seems to be just like a big, like the crux a lot of times for these owners to open these gyms, and they will. They need to move and they have an opening date and they have goals. And so I like that you do the vision planning. I mean, just so much that you said that would just be invaluable to the people that we talk to day in and day out, that I wish they would know about that. So thank you.
Our big thing, thank you for saying that. And our big thing is education, like we're doing right now. You won't ever see CARR up on a billboard or on the side of a building, or we don't spend money advertising. What we do and the way we get word out is through education, through podcasts. We speak at a lot of schools, residency programs, associations, all kinds of different meetings, societies, things like that. We try to do stuff like this because, again, we'd love to have everybody work with us. But even if you don't, if we can give you some insight, some tips and tricks and things to negotiate and look at, and if we can be of help anyway, the big deal is just what you said. I wish I knew about you 2 months ago, a year ago, 5 years ago, whatever it was. And so our big deal is just getting word out and making sure that people know there is a free resource, a no-cost resource to them that can help. And so to that point, if I can direct people to the website, we've got probably 200 blogs and articles and case studies and all that kind of stuff on our website. We have a resources tab that if you want to, we have commercial real estate glossary and FAQs. And what is this word? If you're looking at a lease and you're like, what is this word mean? What is assignment and subletting mean? Or what is whatever? You can go on to the website and we have a glossary there. You can get all that information, type it in or see what we have there. And we have a tremendous amount of articles on everything we talked about today, purchase versus lease, or what is negotiable, or negotiation strategy, or what if my landlord is my friend? Anthony, you mentioned that early. What if my landlord is my friend? and how that is probably the most costly friendship you have, because you're probably getting taken advantage of from a great guy. But just because they're your relationship, your friend, you're not getting a they know you're not going to negotiate.
That's the worst. As soon at the car dealerships, when they hear that, like, oh, so-and-so set me down, he's a friend of it. That is the worst, because they know you're not going to negotiate because they think they got the best deal.
Exactly. So we got all kinds of stuff like that and tips and tricks. So you can definitely find resources there too. But we're big on the education game, just trying to get insight out to people.
Yeah. I love that, because that's what we do. That is exactly what we do on here, where I'm like, if you don't go with us, at least talk to us so we can tell you things to avoid before getting taken advantage of or anything like that. So I love that you guys do that, and you guys don't even charge them. I wish we could say that, but we come as close as we can. But you would have saved so many people throughout the 10-year or over 10 years now of doing this, where the stories that I've heard with positions that they were in because it was their first time gym owner, they know what to look out for. So thank you for letting us do this and record this. Now we can, next time I have a new gym owner, I'll be like, just watch this. And if you don't call Ken, call someone like him at least to talk to them, to see how many mistakes you would have made by DIYing it. I don't know, but I thank you so much. And again, I would love to have you back on in the future to hear, like what you said, what we can go over, not just stories of life lessons learned from people that didn't do the right thing, but also demographic search and traffic studies and all that stuff. So thank you.
Yeah.
We love it. And I thank you guys for the opportunity. And if there's anything I can do to help, my information's on the website, or get connected to you guys, and then you can connect them up with me, and we'll we'll get you whatever answers you need.
Yeah.
Awesome. We'll put your info in the description, but tell everybody your website if they do want to contact you.
That's perfect. It's carr.us. So it's CARR.us. And if you just go there, all of our team is there. Find an agent. You can find your local person. You can get connected to me, and I can get you connected up if you want with the best local agent there. And then all the resources and blogs, articles, and trainings and all that kind of stuff up there too.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Ken.
All right.
Yeah, I learned so much from you. This was great. So thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you again. And thanks for watching. If you made this far in the video, thanks for watching.
Yes.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.